Are you looking to get into overland travel on a budget? Well, in this video, we're gonna give you some tips and tricks on just how to do that. So the first tip is going to be a mindset issue. And for me personally, one of the ways I look at it as every dollar that I spend on my rig or my kit is one less dollar that I can spend on fuel. So I wanna look at everything with the lens that the most important part of overland travel is the travel itself. The vehicle, the gear, the patch collection, all of that stuff is just a backdrop. It's a means to an end. The main focus is on travel. So I wanna make sure I look at it from the perspective of going, okay, if I'm gonna spend my money and I have a limited amount, I wanna make sure I'm spending it on the travel part. I wanna make sure I'm putting my money in the gas tank. And if that means that I gotta take a slightly easier path, then I might have to do that. But that's one of the mindsets that you can get yourself into is every dollar that you spend on your rig or kit is one less dollar you can spend on fuel. Similar to that, a mindset you can have is less mods, more miles. And this kind of helps you frame, is that modification to your vehicle absolutely necessary? Do you need the big 50-inch light bar, or do you just need a set of smaller, cheaper lights to give you a little bit of extra light just to give you what you need versus what looks good for the gram? Another thing to remember is that stock is cheap for a number of different reasons. Stock vehicles usually get better fuel mileage. The parts that wear and tear on it usually last longer. And obviously, if you're not spending money on the mods on the rig, you're spending that money on the gas and you're getting better fuel economy. So you're gonna be able to go on longer trips with less money. One of the other things is to invest in yourself. The amount of time and money you invest in yourself will pay itself back 10 to 100-fold. So you can actually do more with less money and less gear because you have the skills, you have the knowledge, and you have the experience. It's gonna be able to get you out there. Plus, that knowledge and skills is gonna travel with you, whereas sometimes the gear doesn't. Another thing to consider when looking at ways to save money is to build your own stuff as opposed to buying it. When you look at a lot of the products that are on the shelf, that's a lot of money because somebody else has put the time, money, and effort into research and design. They have to market that product. They have to get that product made. They have to get that product into the hands of retailers so that you can walk into the store and buy it. But again, with a little bit of skills and a little bit of knowledge, you can often take that money and invest it in yourself so that you can build those things yourself. So for instance, when it came time to build my own set of drawers in the back of my vehicle, I was able to spend less than $150 to build my own little cargo organizer, as opposed to spending hundreds or even thousands of dollars on an off-the-shelf commercial built product. Another thing to consider when it comes to building versus buying is the modifications and repairs to your vehicle. If you're gonna be doing a lot of the work yourself, buying some tools, learning how to do the mechanic and repair stuff on your vehicle, or also the installation of aftermarket parts. If you determine, hey, to go where I wanna go, I do need bigger tires and I do need a lift kit. Consider what it might take for you to learn the skills necessary to install those parts yourself, because the biggest expense in a lot of aftermarket modifications is the amount of labor that you're gonna have to pay for to get those modifications and repairs done to your vehicle. Now, many of you are probably familiar with the expression KISS, keep it super simple. Well, there's another expression that I like to use when talking about traveling on a budget, and that is KILL. It's keep it light and limber. Your vehicle, again, it's a backdrop, it's a means to an end. You don't want to weigh it down with a lot of unnecessary modifications. So if you can keep the vehicle light and limber, you're gonna get better fuel economy, you're gonna have less wear and tear on the vehicle. So again, with KISS, you're keeping it simple, and with KILL, you're keeping it limber, and those things kind of work well together to make sure that you're not spending a lot of money on needless modifications. Along those lines, again, one of the mindsets that you can have is to really focus on the experience. Don't get caught up in the gear, don't get caught up in the vehicle, and focus on taking that money you have, that little bit of money on the budget, and stretching it out, focusing on the experiences and getting yourself where you wanna go and seeing the things that you wanna see. Along those lines, while you're traveling, one of the easiest ways to save money is to not eat out everywhere you go. So when you can buy local ingredients and cook the food yourself, you're gonna actually save a lot of money compared to if you try to eat out at every restaurant along the way. Similarly, when you're looking for a place to stay, things like hostels, hotels, Airbnbs, those things tend to add up really, really quick. And if you're gonna be going out for weeks or months or even maybe trying to do a multi-year trip, that can add up really, really quick. So learning ways to camp remotely or camp primitively will also prevent you from spending that money on a place to camp. Another thing to look into is leveraging memberships and passes. There's a lot of parks and services out there that have reciprocity. So if you have, for instance, here in the United States, the National Park Pass, that actually has reciprocity with a lot of state parks and state campgrounds in the area and can sometimes get you a discount. So when you're staying on BLM land, if you have that National Park Pass, it'll actually save you upwards to 50% a night if you're camping in a BLM campsite. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you to save money and stretch that little bit of a budget you have is to simply slow down. If you travel a lot of miles a day, and it adds up, again, you're gonna be spending a lot of money on fuel, and fuel is your biggest expense. But if you slow your pace down and you drive 100 or 75 or 50 miles a day, you're gonna be able to stretch the length of your trip and still spend the same amount of money on fuel, but stretch the length of your trip in the number of days. And so again, when you're thinking about focusing on the experience, focusing on where you're going, and possibly getting really deep into the area that you're visiting, stretching that time by traveling at a slower pace is a very, very easy way to save a lot of money. For instance, I did a trip in 2015 where I drove from Maine to Florida. I did that trip in 28 days and it cost me $3,000. If I were to do that same trip now, knowing what I know now about travel, I could turn that 28-day trip into a 60-day trip and probably do it on the exact same budget, just spending a little bit more for food and probably a little bit less for fuel by dropping my average daily drive distance from 250 to 300 miles a day down to 100 miles or less. So something you guys can do at home is to think about a certain amount of money you're willing to spend on a trip. And that could be $100, $500, $1,000, or even more. And the basic rule of thumb that I've come up with is for traveling here in North America is roughly $1 a mile. So if you're gonna be going on a trip and say you have $500 to spend, well, that gives you 500 miles, and think about where could you go within 500 miles, and that could be 250 miles out and back, or 100 miles and then a short loop for 300 miles and then 100 miles back home. So just kind of figuring that out, you can get yourself some ideas on how much a short little trip would cost, but then also when you start stretching it out longer, again, what did I say earlier? Slow yourself down. If it's gonna cost you $1 per mile, and you only have $500, well, you can travel 500 miles in one day. Very short trip, very boring. Or you could travel 50 miles a day and stretch that trip out into a 10-day trip. So just something for you guys to consider. Hopefully you found this video on tips and tricks on how to travel on a budget informative, and hopefully that means you can put more money in your gas tank and have a much longer adventure the next time you head out there on the trails, and I hope to see you out there.